And hello, movie lovers. And today I actually have a very good friend of mine is Josh, a Merc with the Movie Block. He's back again. We're going to be doing our fourth Scream movie review, and this is for Scream 4, of course. And so with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's get on with the review. I'm excited to have him here. I'm excited about talking about Scream 4, and let's do it. Hey, Josh.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good, man. How about you?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to talk about this. So
Me too. It's like ripping off the Band-Aid for me, but I know you had a different viewing experience than I did. But
it's true.
still. But yeah, I just want to go into this real quick. So this movie actually had a budget of $40 million. In the box office had 97.2 million, which makes it the lowest out of the Scream film franchise for this movie, which is actually not surprising since most people didn't really care for this film. It had really negative buzz around it.
I
But
mean, it was a decade out after the third movie, which a lot of people didn't really care for either. And I feel like at that point, it had kind of lost some of that shine the franchise had, and I feel like people just didn't care.
yeah, some people probably thought that it was kind of stale in a sense. It was like, why do we need another Scream movie? I'm kind of like screamed out at that point, where
Yeah.
it becomes just basically just recycling. But after let's go on this play though, then all of a sudden in 2022, everybody's like, oh, I want more Scream. So
Yeah.
it goes to show you if you go ahead and let things rest a little bit, people would actually want to see another Scream movie or another thing inside the franchise.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
but anyways, this actually opens up. It opens up in 2011 on the 15th anniversary week of the original Woodsboro murders. High school student Jenny Randall and Maureen Cooper are murdered by Ghostface. So the opening scenes are always one of my favorites and most iconic things within the Scream movies itself, because it always opens up to stab, and it's always like this foreshadowing into the things that are going to be happening and things that we're going to be introduced to in the Scream world. So
Yeah.
that's something that I really always liked. But this one goes on the heavy hand of being meta inside of meta.
I mean, the whole
So,
movie does that, though.
right.
They lean into the meta within meta throughout the entire movie, so I think it fits in that sense.
That's very true. It definitely fits and it actually knows what it's doing. So I can't fault it for that.
Yeah,
But whenever they're over there watching these movies, it's like us as the audience is who's actually pulled into this, watching all these Scream movies, and then you're getting mixed up with which one's what, and they even talked about that. And like I said, it's meta inside of meta with the stab movies. It doesn't work with the girl stabbing her friend for talking too much, which is also like us in the theaters,
yeah,
though, who would actually kill someone, not literally kill someone, but basically just telling someone to shut up, and they're not, and you just really it just aggravates you to the point where you want to actually
yeah.
do something about it.
I I
And
like I like that sequence because like this is supposed to be Stab 7, like so they've done a ton of these movies, in this span of time. And when you get that far into a franchise, you tend to you're pulling out whatever you can. And so it worked for me because it felt like this isn't something that we've ever seen in a Scream movie. It's not something that we would ever see in a Scream movie like that, especially not in the opening where they give away the killer right away. You know what I mean? That's not something you're ever going to see.
no,
So I thought it was a nice parody kind of commentary on how these over bloated franchises kind of lose their way. And I think it's funny because we're getting close to 7 now. We're approaching Scream 6 now, you know what I mean,
right.
coming up. So it's kind of interesting.
Most definitely. And plus, it's been a decade since, like you
Yeah.
mentioned. So therefore, of course, they wouldn't start off with like a Scream 4 or like a Stab
Yeah.
4 or Stab 5. They would go on ahead and go with all the other franchises within that decade.
Yeah, I mean
So,
they obviously pumped out a lot cuz like it's been 10 years since the events of Scream 3 and they've pumped out 5 movies. Like they did a new Scream 3 cuz obviously they didn't finish the Scream or the Stab 3 that they were filming
right.
in Scream 3, so, but they made a new one based on those events, and then 4 more films also within those 10 years. So like they were just churning them out within that world, which I thought was interesting.
Exactly. And, that's what I liked about this, though, too, is how much Wes Craven was in tune with the different styles of genres when it comes down to horror movies, because horror movies have changed since the last Scream movie.
Oh
And
yeah.
we actually ended up having like a bunch of Saw movies and reboots. And they also mentioned reboots and also remakes within the horror genre itself. So that's something I really liked about that, was how self-aware Wes Craven was. Even though it's been a decade, he was still in tune within that decade to be able
Mhm.
to try and do something that's different.
Yeah.
Whether or not people will pull on it or not, that's another story. But I do give him credit for the creativity that he tried to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could tell he leaned a little bit, into that with, upping the like the gore factor and that kind of stuff. Like at one point we see somebody gutted and their intestines hanging out, which is not something we'd seen really before, in these movies. So I think that's far other than the first scene of the first movie. Outside of that, they didn't really
No,
do that. So I thought that was really kind of a nice way to tap into the type of horror that was going on at that time, and they talk about it in the movie itself, or they're like, you gotta up the gore level, when they're
up the
talking about
ante
the
on it.
rules. Yeah,
Right.
so I like that.
I like how they also mention like the Saw movies and the Hostel
Hmm.
movies as like torture porn, which I've heard
Yeah,
everybody mention how that could actually be condensed into like torture porn.
yeah,
So, you know, I understand where they're coming from, but for us, it just feels like as like Jigsaw himself are solving these pieces to actually get to the final movie. That's actually how I felt about it. But some people actually felt like it was actually torture porn.
yeah,
And so that's actually a direct quote that other viewers would actually see those kind of movies. So I definitely liked how Wes used that
yeah.
play
Agreed.
around with.
Yeah.
But another thing I liked was the tech that they decided to use during that time of 2011, because this is actually the start of the iPhone. And also, too, this was also the start of Twitter, basically, and
Mhm.
also, too, Facebook, and how
Okay.
popular Facebook was
Yeah,
getting, how popular Twitter was getting, because they mentioned those two social
yeah.
networks.
Yeah, social
And
media
yeah,
was really starting to boom, in that time frame. Like I looked some stuff up because the whole thing, it kind of centers around what I put in my notes as millennials wanting to become famous. Which I'm a millennial, so it
right.
is what it is to talk about it. But that was a thing, the whole YouTube culture that started back then, really kind of ramping. And like I was looking some stuff up, and like Vine came out like 2 years later, after this movie, and like that escalated that kind of fame that they were seeking in this movie. So I thought that was really, yeah, I think it was a really smart route to go because it was really indicative of what was going on at that time.
Definitely, and it makes it even more concrete because of the fact that technology is changing. They don't have
Hmm.
the same things that we had back in the early '90s whenever we first was introduced into the screen world with the caller ID and the dial-up internet and stuff like that. That stuff is
Yeah.
gone. So so Wes has to think of another creative way of actually doing it and keep within the times, so that way you can actually introduce new technology and new ways of thinking and draw in the new crowd while also trying to please the old school crowd that we are, and
Yeah.
drag us into it. So that was a perfect balance of him trying to do something with it. And, I also like the fact too that like I said, it tries to capture the grudge. Okay, here's another thing. Each thing actually feels like that he's copying off of each movie with each kill
Yeah.
as well. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. But
Hmm.
that was like a little thing I mixed into because of the fact that he winds up
Yeah, I
closing the
noticed
garage
that.
door.
I
Yeah.
noticed that many times. Yeah, where I was like, "Oh yeah, this is from that movie, and this is from that movie." Yeah, I noticed that a lot.
So that was something that I thought that was very interesting on how they would do that into like a copycat kind of killer who has
Yeah,
found inspiration behind that. So that was one thing that I liked about it, was the technology, the birth of the iPhone, basically, where people were starting to use iPhones in different apps, because they even mentioned apps though too in this
yep,
movie.
yeah,
So it was a start of a new era, a new age at that
yeah,
point. Um, but here's the thing though, the opening credits for me pulled me out because it doesn't have You know how it always has a little spooky vibe kind of music to it? The red right hand was always one of my favorite parts of the theme song within Saw. Oh, not Saw, but in Scream 4.
Oh yeah,
And that was not in Scream, but in the
no,
universe of Scream was
Scream.
actually
Yeah.
some of my favorite things. But the music they chose for this felt flat to me. It felt like very 2010s pop music culture kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like, okay, I really don't like the music. It pulls me out of it.
Yeah,
But
I thought the same thing. As soon as the opening music started, I was like, nah, this is not what I was hoping for. Because I honestly hadn't remembered that until I rewatched it again for this, and I was like, nah, they could have went better.
definitely, because I was thinking to myself, this actually feels like a teen comedy versus it being a
It
horror movie,
felt
slasher
more
movie,
the entire opening almost felt like I was watching like Scary Movie
like a
instead of
spoof.
Scream, you know? Just because like of how incredibly meta it went. Like I enjoy the opening, but it doesn't fit as well as the others from the other, from the other three movies. It doesn't to use the pun, it doesn't scream, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just it didn't, but
No. And
they,
then we
I
also
guess,
have
decided to do something different.
exactly. Then of course you wind up seeing this other thing play out after evidence is found and her and Rebecca Walters' car. Sydney becomes a suspect in the murders and must stay in town until they are solved. Which she writes a book, and
Yeah.
you can actually see the stuff how much time has passed because Gail is actually having writer's block, and while Gail's having writer's block, Sydney is actually going on a book tour, but doing a
Yeah.
fantastic, better job than what Gail is doing. Because it's
Yeah.
about trying to show, hey, look, step out of the darkness, stop hiding from your true self, versus Gail, who is trying to make money off of Sydney's life
Yeah.
and the murders around her. And that's where Gail is actually having the trouble with because there's no more murder. So therefore, she can't really write anything. So therefore, she has to try and think of something to come off of.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, Gail, her whole existence is within the murders. It's unfortunately for her, that's how it goes, and that's how it goes for a lot of journalists. Really, if there's not a story going, a big story, then they don't have anything to latch onto. So it's unfortunately for her, yeah, that is kind of how that goes.
Then once that winds up happening, we go on ahead. We see that the town is actually decorating, and well, not decorating, but these pranks are going on within the town because it's been a decade and it's the anniversary of what happened within the very first Scream movie. And you see Dewey, and then you see his new partner, which
Yeah, I want to talk about Dewey real quick.
okay,
They don't ever, I don't, unless I missed it, but I'm pretty sure they don't ever mention it. He has absolutely no limp whatsoever now.
no. Everything that I liked about the first three films being in continuity with each other is gone. He has
Yeah.
no limp.
Not even a hint of one. Just completely gone. Yeah.
It's like I could just see him talking, like Wes talking to David Arquette. Hey, look, everything that we did in the third one, yeah, don't do. What about the limp? Don't do that. What about the face I make? Don't do that.
Yeah. Right. It's just,
So
and he's the
Wes,
sheriff now. Like he's back to
right.
actually being a cop again. Like, yeah.
Exactly, which I thought was hilarious though too, because now he's back to his formal Dewey self,
Yeah.
and he has that confidence
Which,
and that.
yeah, if you think
Yeah,
about the whole, what they're doing with this movie, they're essentially trying to create, like remake this movie, the first movie. And yeah, in the first movie, Dewey was a cop. He didn't have a limp. So like that's kind of what they're doing here. Is
okay.
You know what I mean?
So that actually does make sense now that you think about it, because they do mention remakes in this movie, and then
Yeah.
basically it's basically taking that and turning it and making this own film into like a remake, a reboot of its own self.
It's like The Force Awakens. Think about it. It's pretty much the same plot of the original film, but a little different.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're going to get into this other thing, this other little detail that I really liked, because Randy mentions it in part 2 about how he would actually change an ending to a horror movie. And I
Yeah.
want to talk about that and how Wes uses that into this movie, which I thought was smart.
Cool.
So another thing too is Sydney that basically Dewey's theme song also feels out of place.
Yeah.
Because normally I like it because it has this Western kind of feel to it, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we
This
talked
one
about
actually,
that in the last review. Yeah.
right. And this one, it just feels out of place with that,
Yeah.
with the theme of it.
Yeah.
But okay, so I want to talk about Dewey and the woman partner is very awkward and
Deputy Judy. She's got the hots for Dewey.
She reminds me of, remember Tiny Toons Adventures, the girl bunny that always had a.
Yeah.
She reminds me of her for some reason. Every single time I see her, I'm automatically thinking of her, or I'm thinking of Zootopia. Every single time I'm thinking of her as a rabbit.
Nice. Okay,
So
I can
I
see
don't know
that.
why.
Yeah, sure, I can see that.
But I just this over sexualization, this awkwardness about her, is like
Yeah.
very awkward because she gives him chocolates and then she's wearing this tight sheriff's outfit that looks like it belongs in a Halloween shop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, girl, he's not even interested in you. He's with Gail.
He's been married for a decade, and like she is the same age as Sydney because she mentions that her and Sydney went to high school together.
Exactly. And
Which
then
we obviously never saw her in the first movie, but she was apparently there somewhere.
probably in the background somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing that I thought that was actually even funnier was this, okay? So you make him these heart-shaped cupcakes, which implies and insinuates that she wants to get with him. Then all of a sudden he takes it and puts it inside the car, and then she just randomly asks, "How's Gail doing?"
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah. I think she's fishing for information there. I think she's hoping that he's going to let on that they're having issues or something, that where she can just kind of slide right in there. I think that's what they were going for, but maybe that could just be me reading into it. I don't know.
I understand. But for me, it just felt like really awkward. And
It
like,
was
okay,
absolutely awkward. Yeah.
so you want to have an affair with him, and then you're going to ask him about how his wife is doing. It's like very messy on that part.
Yeah.
But it also goes to show you how messy remakes actually are.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
So that might actually be something that Wes is actually trying to do too. But there's also this other thing too. The connection to this movie to Sydney's cousins feels like the survival horror movie from Final Destination.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they also talk about survival horror.
Yeah.
Too. So I feel a little bit of Final Destination a little bit whenever the killer's calling her and they're in the car and stuff like that. I felt a little bit of Final Destination a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know about you though.
I mean, that hadn't crossed my mind, but I can see that. Yeah.
Okay. Then of course we're gonna get into the book reading and stuff like that in a minute. That night, Olivia is killed by Ghostface, and Jill and Kirby watched in horror from across the street. Sydney herself then confronted by Ghostface, and they fight, and Ghostface forces to flee when Perkins and Hoss arrive.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about this scene. Okay, so Ghostface gets booted in the face, right? We've watched the movie, so we know who the killer is. We know which one that was. We see him like the next scene, and he's fine. Like he didn't just literally get punted in the face. No mark, no nothing. He's totally good. I was like, I don't know. I feel like that's not super believable. Maybe she just didn't kick him as hard as it seemed, but I don't know.
It just felt like she kicked him a lot harder, though, to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seemed that way. So, but totally
also
fine.
Too, I do like how they played this off, though, is like, open the closet door. And she's like, what do you mean, open the closet door?
Yeah.
And then she opens it. He goes, who said I was in that closet door? And then it's revealed that he's actually in the house next door. So I definitely like how they played off that. I thought that worked.
Yeah, I thought that was really a really smart kind of way to do that, to kind of trick the audience into wondering, is he there? And then put him in a position where he can do a kill and they can't stop it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you also have, well, this is also another thing I wanted to bring up too. Jill, which is Sydney's cousin, is also coping with with her ex-boyfriend Trevor. And then, of course, that's also too when Sheldon gets a threatening phone call from Ghostface, as does her friends Olivia Morris.
Yeah, and they do, they recreate stuff with Trevor that they did with Billy, with the climbing through the window and all that stuff, which I thought was kind of cool. And going back to the girl across the way who gets killed, I think that's the goriest kill of this entire movie. It's wild. That, like, when I was talking before about how they upped the gore factor in this movie, seeing her just guts spilled out on the bed, literally wall covered in blood, something that we hadn't seen in the previous 3 movies, and rewatching this took me by surprise because I'd forgotten about how gory that scene was. I was like, all right, they're really doing something, trying something a little different here. I like that.
Right. And it seemed like this version of Ghostface is a lot different than what we got in the first 3 Ghostfaces, because we never seen that before, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the fact that, you actually get to see the fact that, they're trying something new and the person has got it out, and you see the intestines on the bed and you see the blood splatter. Of course, I haven't seen this movie since I last saw this in 2011. So when I saw this again, I'm like, wow. I said, I forgot about this.
Yeah.
Because this is actually pretty good stuff right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to see that in a Scream movie, I really liked it. I liked seeing something that was new. Also, too, it also shows you this is actually a new Ghostface. This is not the same ones that we've been dealing with before. This is one that's after a message and trying to send a message.
And I'm pretty sure the majority of the kills are, what's his name? I don't remember his name now. Charlie. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I don't think Jill does much at all as far as killing.
I was thinking that myself. I'm like, there's no way that she does any of it other than maybe throwing the other girl out of the window. That would be the only thing that I could think that she would be able to do.
Yeah.
Is pushing the girl out the window.
Yeah.
Because that would be something that a girl, because girls don't normally fight with their fist unless, but, I would think that she would just push her out the window because of how much the person weighs.
Yeah, I could see that.
That's how I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. So anyways, this is what happens too. Dewey's wife is struggling with writer's block, we mentioned that, and decides to investigate the murders against her husband's wishes, like she always does. Sydney stays over with Jill and her mother, Sydney's Aunt Kate, that night. Olivia is killed by Ghostface, like we mentioned. And so it goes over to this other part where at the hospital, Sydney fires Rebecca after learning of her desires to exploit the murders and increase book sales.
She was a terrible person the entire time. Like, I love Alison Brie as an actor, but I hated her character in this movie.
Her character was horrible. And also, too, she was just trying to gain popularity because of the fact that she's handling a book for Sydney. Had no idea what the book entails or anything like that. And you're supposed to be her publicist. And how do you...
She was happy that murders happened while they were there. Like, that's sick, man. Like, that's messed up on her part.
I would put her at the same level as Ghostface at that point in time.
Because, like, absolutely. She could have been the killer. I could have believed that. Absolutely.
Right, because I'm like, wait, you're happy. You haven't read the book. How do you know this book is even good in the first place? And everything. All you care about is marketing and getting your half of what the sales of what Sydney draws in. And I like how, Sydney's at the book doing her book review and stuff like that, reading. And then you see Dewey walk in. Then you see Gail walk in. But first Gail walks in and she gives Gail a hug. And for once, they're not fighting at each other or anything. They actually hug each other.
Yeah.
But you can tell that she misses the light. You can tell Gail misses that, like being in the spotlight,
Yep.
but while also trying to be happy for Sydney as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Dewey walks in and he says, "Look, right now we have to lock this thing down. Everybody's a suspect, and we need to see what's going on." They call up the phone, and then that's when they find out that there's actually some pictures of Sydney in the back of the trunk of a car.
Yeah. Oh, bloody. There's like a knife. I think there was a mask back there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the public's like, "Okay, no big deal.
Yeah.
We'll just move. We'll just go to another state, another town."
Doesn't even phase her. Yeah.
No. So then, this is also another thing I want to mention. At the hospital, Sydney fires Rebecca after learning of her desire to exploit the murders to increase her book sales, and Rebecca is supposedly murdered by Ghostface at a parking garage. Now, this is the yes moment that goes on in a horror movie where the douchebag deserves to die.
Yep.
I'm like, yes, girl, you deserve to die. You were trying to make profit off of somebody else's life and not knowing what that book is. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you know this book is even good? You're getting Sydney to promote it. This book could actually be bad.
Yeah.
And you're promoting it, and you're acting like these murders are okay, so that way Sydney can be in the spotlight while also trying to feed your, basically just trying to feed your praise, basically.
Yeah. 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 I was definitely not upset that when she died.
Same. And then Gil enlists the help of two high school movie fanatics, Charlie Walker and Robbie Mercer.
Yep.
And before we get over to that, though, the way that the publicist actually dies, she gets pushed off the roof and then lands on top of the news van, which is kind of ironic because of the fact that's the same news van that Gail would actually been using, because it's actually the same name that she used from back in the 90s.
Yeah, people seem to die around her news vans. You know, I mean, her camera guy, you know,
right.
The first one, Randy in the second one, you know, in the van. So
right. And then
maybe she should stop having a news van.
I think that'd be a great idea. I think that's why she decided to go with writing, which is actually a better choice. Yeah. But Charlie Walker and Robbie Mercer, they're two horror fans. This is actually where you get into the stylization of found footage movies, and also the craze of the found footage movies and live streaming for the very first time, because of the fact that this is actually introducing into live streaming, into YouTube, and representing who we are as fans of horror and movies.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the introduction of those characters?
I like them because they're like the Randy of the, I mean, realistically, Robbie and Charlie are the Randy and Stu of this movie, in more ways than one. And even though I would have loved another cameo from Jamie Kennedy, it would have been, you know, I'll always take that in a Scream movie. I don't care.
Same.
It was still nice to have characters who were going over rules the way Randy would. It brought that back. I really enjoyed that. And I like the introduction of the live streaming tech, simply because it felt like stuff, because like in 2011, you know, I was, let's see, how old was I? 26, 27 at that time. And so like, obviously I'm a little older than they are, but I understood all of that stuff, you know, like I was much closer in age to them than I would have been when the first movie came out, because I was 12 when that movie came out.
Right.
So I was much more inundated with that kind of technology, and it felt familiar, and I was comfortable with it. It didn't feel awkward for me to see that. It felt like a natural progression.
Same here. It shows you the new level of actually watching horror movies, explain the rules and stuff in a new way. It wasn't forced, and that's something that I really liked about it, was how they were explaining rules in this way of this new generation that's coming up, watching horror movies, found footage movies, survival movies, different genres and explaining it and breaking it down to Gale. And that's something I really enjoyed. And I was 26 when this movie came out. So it was very reminiscent to me watching myself as if I was one of the characters on the screen and trying to break it down to Gale. So that's what I saw myself in, was those characters, was because of the fact that if I had a film school in high school, that's where I would be at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would have loved to have had something like that in high school.
Same here. That would be awesome. But I would like to know the permission slips that you would actually have to get for rated R movies. Because
absolutely.
And I can't believe this school actually allows Stab to be on a poster in your high school, knowing number one, Sydney went to the same high school. So you're doing promoting for this movie, and that girl went to the same high school.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. So I'm like, who's the principal here? We don't even have a principal at this school.
Well, it's definitely not Henry Winkler.
Nope, definitely not. But, I just thought it was a great moment, though, to just see new characters doing this. And then Charlie theorizes that the killer is following the rules of horror remakes, and Gale and Sydney can conclude the killer will likely strike the Stabathon, a screening party held in a barn where teenagers gathered to binge, watch all movies and Stab franchise. Gale sneaks into the party and to investigate.
Yeah, this felt reminiscent to the opening of Scream 2.
Or Scream 1, too. Because the fact, that's where I got Scream 1 vibes from this. But go on, I'm sorry.
I was just, it made me think of that opening sequence in the movie theater when they were watching Stab. People were, going crazy about it.
Okay.
So I don't know if they were pulling from that at all. That's just where my mind went when I watched
That's where my mind went, though, too, now that you mentioned it, because I did okay. So this is where Scream 1 comes into place for me. The webcams that she's setting up, new technology with webcams and stuff, and doing that, and doing things wirelessly versus doing how you were doing it back in the 90s. And that was actually something that I thought that was really cool, how they updated that. But you're right, though. It is very reminiscent to the second one, because number one, Gale has a Scream mask on with a leather jacket, which is the same leather jacket that Common had used in the second one. And then what you do, not Common, but I forgot.
Omar Epps.
Omar Epps. Thank you for correcting me on that. I couldn't remember the actor, but Omar Epps' character gets killed, and then you see the blood on the leather jacket when Jada Pinkett Smith actually figures it out. And I like how she goes up to the screen, hides her camera, and then everybody's booing at her, just like how they booed at Jada for going up to the screen, and then she flips them off and then goes on ahead and walks off.
Yep.
And at first I thought it was actually the teenage girl who wanted to be like Gale that was doing that.
Yeah, that's what I thought at first ther Yeah.
But then I'm like, that looks like Gale. That looks like her walk. I'm like, no, that's not her.
Yeah.
So it was more fitting for her to be Gale to do that. But I thought the barnyard stuff actually works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoy the when Gale goes up into the hayloft and she's setting up these cameras and she goes back to the car and everything, and slowly, one by one, the killer is disabling these cameras. I thought that was really, really cool. And then when she goes back up there and we have the fight and everything, I thought it worked really well. Because you weren't sure what exactly was going to happen. She discovers that camera and everything. And then, like you mentioned, we get some found footage type stuff where Dewey is watching and we're seeing behind her, because she's holding that camera facing behind her. And we see Ghostface just charge at her. And in that moment, Dewey is us, watching. He's watching the movie essentially, and I thought that it worked really well for me. Yeah.
It worked. That part worked out really well for me as well too, because he's telling her, "Look out behind you." Of course,
he's
Ghostface
yelling at
there.
the screen. She can't hear him, and that's what we do as an audience,
right? So I definitely like how they treated Dewey as like one of us, screaming at the screen. I like that. And then it goes into this other thing, though, too, Josh, where, remember when Ghostface is over there changing out the camera, blocking the camera, and then she has to go over there to investigate it. So that's why she's down there in the first place. And then, she knows he's there. And then that's when she winds up calling Dewey, hey, look, Ghostface is over here at the barn. You guys need to go on ahead, come down here.
Yeah.
And then that's when when Dewey winds up seeing her on the found footage thing and telling her to look behind her. So I thought that was actually, like you said, it was very fitting and definitely worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then after that winds up happening, we actually have basically a screener.
Also,
Yep.
real quick,
Yeah.
before we get away from that, something I don't think I ever noticed while watching this movie, the first Stab movie, it's apparently a Robert Rodriguez movie.
What?
Because on the screen, it's like Stab, and it's like a Robert Rodriguez film. I'm just like, oh, that's kind of awesome. Never got that before.
I never did either. That's actually
Yeah.
pretty interesting because I'm like, oh, I might actually have to watch a Robert Rodriguez movie. I would actually watch that,
Right?
just to
That's
see what it
I'm
would
saying.
look like. They
Yeah.
actually need to make a special edition and make it for the audience as a Stab
I would love that.
collector's
That
edition
would be
directed by
awesome.
Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
That's what I would like
It
to
could
see.
be a short film for all I care. I think it would be awesome just to see something.
I think so too. Like for the anniversary of Scream 4, have that.
Yeah.
By the way, guys, I want his paycheck signed by for Josh and I for that idea. So go on ahead and do that. I do appreciate it. But anyways, goes fast. Okay. Jill, Kirby, Charlie, Robbie, and Trevor are at an after party at Kirby's house when Ghostface strikes, killing a drunken Robbie. Now, another thing that winds up happening here, though, too, everything is settled down. Nobody's really having a party at all. They're just basically going to have a stab marathon over there because of the fact that the stab marathon actually got canceled because they shut down everything because of the people getting murdered and stuff. So they go on ahead, they go to this after party, and I definitely like how this is actually going, because then you actually get Trevor winds up coming in there, and then you have this conversation with Charlie and his crush that he likes and stuff like that. So I definitely like that.
Yeah.
And she's also a crazy horror fan though too. So that's something that I really liked, was the common interest that they both have.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Kirby as a character, first off. I really do. And I'm glad she's coming back in the new one. I hope they explain, because they don't tell us they don't actually ever mention that she survived until we see the trailers for the new movie and she's in it. And so I hope that they give us a little bit more about that when we see that one. But I find it interesting how she's super willing to be flirty and do stuff, but apparently never was before. I don't know. I'm curious as to why suddenly, because he's obviously been into her for a while, and I feel like the way Charlie kind of operates, he probably didn't keep it a secret all that time.
No, because remember, he's like really awkward.
Yeah.
And he stands out. And then when you wind up finding out that she has a thing for him, and he's shocked over it.
Yeah. And she seems like a very like straightforward kind of person. Like, she's going to say what she wants to say. She's going to do what she wants to do. So if she liked him, why didn't she act on that in the first place?
I think she was, okay, this is me in high school. I'm the awkward guy in high school. That I'm not catching on to the signals that someone's into you.
Oh, okay. So you think maybe she was, he just wasn't catching.
And it just went over his head the whole time.
Okay. I could buy that. Yeah, I could buy that.
So that's what I'm thinking, because think of it like this. I'm lanky, I'm awkward, I'm into this film stuff. Nobody's really buying into this whole entire horror thing at all. And here's this random girl that I'm into, but I'm too shy to even say anything. And then this random girl that's into the same stuff that I'm into is blunt. She's honest. She wants to make a move. She makes a move, and then it goes over the person's head.
Okay, I could totally see that. So yeah, I can buy that.
So that's what I was actually sold into, was the fact that, because remember, he goes, well, if you're into me, make a move. I just did.
Yeah, so, it's true. Yeah, she does. Yeah. He is kind of oblivious when it comes to that. So
then, she's into trivia with the stab movies and horror movies and things like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really fascinating. And then, then we get into this other thing where basically, wasn't it Trevor that goes in and pretty much cop blocks them?
Yeah, he just shows up. Yeah.
And she goes, "What are you doing here?"
Mhm.
I was told by Sydney's cousin to come down here because she was because her mom was on her butt all the time.
Yeah.
But you also have another thing that too with the two cops that are looking out for Sydney as well. You have Anthony Anderson in this movie that's
Yeah,
like a
Anthony
comedian.
Anderson and Adam Brody as the
Yeah.
cops. Yeah, I
So I thought that
forgot
was
about that.
interesting that they have those two in this movie, and then they're watching the house, and then I like how they go off the rules of survival as well,
Yeah.
where Adam Brody turns around and says to Anthony Anderson, "I'll be right back." He goes, "Well, shit."
Yep. I gotta say, the way Anthony Anderson dies in this movie, dude, like, I don't think they've done a kill quite like that.
No,
It's just a right to the forehead, and he's still alive for a short period of time after. I thought that was pretty intense. I really enjoyed that.
me too. And Anthony is still over there trying to swing, and he's not
Yep.
swinging at anything but air. So I thought that was fairly cool.
Yeah.
And then you wind up finding out that, maybe Sydney's cousin is actually in trouble. So that actually sets Sydney off to where she needs to go on ahead and go over to where she's at this after party. But
Yeah.
before that happens, she gets intervened with Ghostface, gets that confrontation with him. And then the aunt gets stabbed through the mail slot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that I don't know. I'm over there doing this is me just doing this whole entire analogy of like, how would that work? Like,
I mean, he knew that she was well, actually, I'm pretty sure that was Jill, first off.
mhm,
So, because Charlie was at the after party.
right,
Okay. And so Sydney specifically says, "Get down and brace the door." She probably heard that and knew she was down on the ground. So when the door closes, she's probably like, perfect opportunity. Boom. Because I forgot that the mail slot was there. I thought she was just it was just gonna go through the door.
me
Kind of
too.
like
That's what I
what
thought.
happened in Scream 2 in
Hmm.
the bathroom scene. I thought it was gonna be like that. But then when it was revealed, I was like, oh yeah, it's the mail slot. I was like, okay, guess that works. Sure. It was convenient, I'll say, but because if she had been any higher off to the side at all, it wouldn't have worked, obviously. But yeah, I think it worked for me, and it was believable enough because she would have known that her mom was down there because Sydney said it pretty loudly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is actually the turning point now where we actually have, Sydney is confronted by Charlie and a second Ghostface revealing herself as Jill. He
Yeah.
admits to masterminding the murders of jealousy from the fame that Sydney received for surviving the previous killing sprees, and desires to achieve fame as a Prasad victim of the murders, intending to frame Trevor as Ghostface. Jill kills Trevor and betrays Charlie because Charlie's actually involved in this too. And there's
Yeah.
also this other
You
thing with
gotta have a
Kirby.
Billy and a Stew.
Right. And then also too, you also have this other thing that winds up happening where Kirby winds up getting killed by Charlie because we're gonna get
Killed.
this because this is something that I really thought was smart though. They do a callback to Scream One where the football players basically tied up
Yeah.
and duct taped.
Yeah. Drew Barrymore's boyfriend in the
Right.
opener. Yeah.
So therefore, you get Charlie, and she's also getting quizzed, just like how Drew
Yeah. Mhm.
Barrymore's character is, and she's naming off all these other movies. She goes, "Yes, I beat his ass. I did it. I did it."
Mhm.
Then all of a sudden, Charlie winds up stabbing her.
Yeah.
He goes, "All this time, you were into me, and you didn't say anything to me."
Yeah.
Like,
It's too late. And he just takes her out.
He does. And then he also has a thing for Sydney's cousin, though, too, Jill.
Yeah.
And they actually kiss. And I'm like, okay, I know what you're doing, Wes.
Mm-hmm.
In the second movie, Randy winds up saying, if someone asked him in the class, if you were to make your own horror movie, what would you do? He goes on ahead. He says, I would make the geek get the girl.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what Wes does. He makes it seem like the geek is going to get the girl, which is Kirby. But in turn, it's going to be Jill instead.
Yeah. But it costs him.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but if I was around that age, I would be going after Kirby, not after Jill. She just looks a little bit better to me, but you know.
I mean, agreed. Yeah. Kirby's more my style.
Yeah, mine too. But so anyways, Jill kills Trevor and betrays Charlie. And the way they do this is also the same way with the father, because they pull the father out of the closet.
Yeah.
And then
because they reference that too, because you know, she says to Sydney, she's like, does this seem familiar when they pull him out? You know, does this look familiar to you, Sid? So I thought that was cool, because they were really legitimately remaking this movie within the movie. You know, it was very meta, like we talked about at the beginning.
Right.
So, and they did that throughout the whole thing, which I really liked.
Which is basically now, if you think about it, just foreshadowing the introduction into what we're getting into. Basically, Wes is actually already telling you what this film is.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
So now that I'm thinking about it, I missed the mark on the second time of viewing this and realizing now when I'm watching.
Yeah.
So, but she winds up taking him out of the closet. But this time, this person does not survive. She shoots him in the crotch.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself,
I am not the girl you cheat on.
So I'm thinking like this. If I was a cop,
yeah,
I'm like, why would Sydney, if you're trying to frame her, why would she shoot at the 18-year-old kid in the crotch?
Oh man.
And then shoot him in the head. That's like a crime for passion.
I would have liked to have heard that explanation talked about.
Me too.
Yeah, you know.
I would like to see them going through the reports. It goes, okay, these kids, okay, I give them credit. They tried doing a remake and try to recreate everything that Sydney went to. But why the hell would she go ahead and shoot him in this kid in the crotch whenever he's twice his age?
Yeah.
That would be called the crime of passion.
Yeah.
And then also too, forensics would actually know for a fact too that he was duct tape.
Yeah.
So there was like a lot of things that I'm going through Dexter.
Though, if you think about it though, someone like Jill,
well, teenagers,
probably not thinking about the forensics portion of of it, the after forensics part of it, you know?
Right.
She's not thinking about that.
She's thinking of the here and now, the fame. And also, too, she's also a teenager, so of course she's not going to think about stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she's not thinking of the after effects, like you said, because she's a teenager. She's going to think impulsively. Versus,
she thinks she's the smartest person in the room, and is just going to get away with it. Like, she's confident that she's just going to get away with it, no matter what. Yeah.
And then she winds up beating the hell out of herself, tearing her hair out.
Jill's commitment in this scene. It was incredible.
She was so badass in this, though. Yeah. Like, she was committed to actually getting away with it.
Yeah.
Her triple homicide, basically.
Yeah. Like, using Trevor's hand to scratch her face, and she stabs herself, smashes herself into a picture, puts herself through a table. It's insane. Yeah.
And then gets back up.
Yeah.
And then lays next to Sydney in perfect time for Dewey to come over there.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my God, I don't know if Sydney's alive or anything. Come back over here. And then you see Jill. She's turned face up at that point, and then she gets escorted out through the hospital to the hospital on a stretcher. And then you see all the lights and the glamour and stuff like that. This girl's Jill
exactly
survived.
What she wanted. You
right.
know, she wants the fame. She's finally getting it.
So I thought that was actually pretty funny because of the fact she's thinking that she's getting away with it. Then you go into the hospital where she's at, and she thinks that Sydney's dead. And then Dewey winds up saying, well, I have some good news. Sydney is alive. They don't in critical condition. They don't know the condition that she's in or anything. She may not even make it. She may not even remember anything. She goes, wait, Sydney's alive?
Yeah.
And you would think Dewey would be like, red flag, Dewey.
He didn't even catch the fact that she knew about Gail's wound when no one else did.
Right.
You know? He didn't catch that until Gail points it out.
Right. She goes, wait, nobody knew about that wound other than the person that had stabbed me.
How did she know about that? He's like, then he takes off. Yeah.
Then he calls Officer Bunny on the on the two-way.
Yeah.
And then you get this confrontation of when she goes up, when Jill goes into, Cindy's room, and she goes, you get all the glory, you get all of this. And what does that leave me? All I hear is Sydney this, Sydney that. Poor Sydney.
Yep. Marsha.
Then she winds up trying to go ahead and choke her. And then also, too, I'm like, oh my God, this girl is going all in still.
Yeah. Okay. So this whole sequence, I had a problem with this entire hospital sequence.
Me too.
Sydney is supposed to be in the ICU. Right? They specifically say, Dewey specifically says that. Yet Jill gets up. She's obviously not that far from where the ICU is, first off. She wanders through these dark halls. She gets in there, and they have a legit fight, screaming, smashing things, glass shattering, right? There's 2 gunshots that go off within that scene because Officer Judy there gets shot and then Jill gets shot. Right. Yet not a single doctor or nurse shows up. No. Where is everybody? We saw one nurse walking, she
was getting off her shift.
But if this is the ICU,
right,
where people are in critical condition, where is the staff?
That's what I wanted to know.
I had the biggest problem with that because not a single person shows up after all of that noise.
You know what? That also bothered me though too, because especially when she takes off the pulse reader and everything else monitoring her, I'm like, wait, where is the staff on that?
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're going for, Wes, but
and then again when Sydney gets launched out of the bed, her stuff gets ripped off.
Right.
Where's where's the nurses coming in being like something's wrong?
Right. And also too, and also another thing that I want to mention is this. Okay, so you have that happening, and like you mentioned, there's no other patient around. It's supposed to be the ICU unit, so you're thinking that there's going to be several patients. This is a huge hospital. I know it's a small town, but this is a huge hospital for a small town.
Mm-hmm. And
there's nobody around.
Yeah.
And then Dewey gets hit upside the head with a steel. That thing should have been plastic.
The bedpan.
Yeah, the bedpan. He gets slapped upside the head with that. Like looks like a 1970s.
Yeah.
Bedpan. But she hits him about 2 times with that.
Yeah.
And nobody hears anything about that. And then, like you mentioned,
and this is already after her and Jill and Sydney smashed into the glass cabinet and broke that apart. Like, you tell like nobody's hearing glass shattering, like none of that. She's punching Sydney in the stomach and stuff where she got stabbed and she's screaming.
Right.
Like, where is everybody?
But hold on, it gets even better though, because oxygen. You need a flame in order to make something explode.
Yeah.
What? Okay. So you mean to tell me there's no oxygen anywhere in this building? And with these guns going on?
Yeah, they're popping off rounds willy-nilly. Like anything could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So that happens. And then finally, we wind up seeing basically Dewey and the police arrive as Sydney and Jill are taken to the okay, we got to that. That's my note. Sorry. Haven't been clued into the fact that Jill subdues Joey and Hicks and holds Gail at gunpoint, but Sydney incapacitates her with a defibrillator.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Now that's my favorite part.
That shot to me was just epic.
The one-liner that Gail uses is clear.
Yeah.
Just like clear, boom.
Yep. And she just fries her, man. I loved it.
That's actually one of my favorite parts in this, though, too. The one-liner with that worked for me. And then she goes on. Then she's. I'm thinking that she's gonna stab her because because she reaches for the glass, but then she finds out finding the gun on the floor, and Gail goes, they always come back.
Well, no, that was Jill who reaches for the glass.
Okay, I thought it was Sydney for a minute.
Yeah,
the scenes look kind of the way it was edited.
I get that.
Okay. But so Sydney goes on ahead, grabs the gun, shoots her in the chest, and calls it a day.
Which bothered me because all three movies, the first three movies, you shoot them in the head.
Right.
They get up, you shoot them in the head. That's the only way you know for sure that they're dead.
And that was something I didn't. Well, that's also another thing, though, too, man. Like, okay, I understand you have the bulletproof vest for the girl that's actually the sheriff, but you would think because of the fact that this girl was into all these stab movies, that she would at least have a bulletproof vest on.
You'd think, but she was in the hospital. Even if she did have that on, which I don't think she would have, because then there would have been questions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You're right.
She I mean, it's possible she had one on at some other point, but
at this point.
She wouldn't have had it on at this point because as far as she knew, she was done and in the clear.
Right. Yeah. That's true too. And so her guard is actually down a lot lower though too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does make sense. And of course, being in the hospital and then they see a bulletproof vest. Well, what's that for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, Susan.
Fashion choice.
You guys are totally understaffed here.
Yeah.
You're not even running a skeleton crew here, but you're going to question me about my bulletproof vest.
Right.
Look, Karen, go on ahead. Maybe some coffee because you're the only one here. I'm going to lay in bed, take my fame.
Right.
But yeah. Then you also have the news reporters. Each news reporter was actually showing that Jill was actually the person that was involved with it. Only one person out of that whole entire bunch was like a representation of Gail.
Yeah.
Glamoring over Jill, giving her the fame.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I like the way they went down the line, like progressing the news story, essentially, like they're all reporting essentially the same thing, but each person is giving you a little bit more of what they're reporting on. I thought that was kind of a cool way to do that.
Definitely. But yeah, this movie was, now that I'm actually going back and us reviewing it, it's not as bad as I remember it now. There was aspects that I liked about it. There was some aspects I did that didn't work.
Yeah.
It still lands in the lower tier for me, but it's not as bad as I went into actually watching it and then now reviewing it. And then you mentioning a few things, it actually changed my mind a little bit on how I actually perceived it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm a big fan of this one. I always have been. This is my third in the franchise. This is my third highest in the franchise. It's above 2 and 3 for me. Yeah, I've always really liked this one, and even rewatching it, it still stays there for me.
Definitely. So I enjoyed the first. Now we are actually going to be going in with Scream 5. So that's going to be the next one that we're going to be doing.
We get to see some returning characters, like your favorite, Officer Judy.
You know what, though? Was so long since I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
And going into the last one, I didn't even realize that was even her.
Oh, yeah.
And I've only seen it once. And so this is going to be a fun revisit for me as well, because I've only seen it since it came out in theaters.
Nice.
So, alrighty. So, is there anything going on as far as your channel goes, or anything like that you would like for other people to know about, or where they can follow you at?
Right now, I'm doing How I Met Your Mother reviews on my show Last Call at McLaren's. You can catch that on the Merc with Movie Blog YouTube channel or on podcast feeds, which is just Last Call at McLaren's. You search that in your podcast feeds. And I produce the DC Comics News podcast as well. So if you're into DC stuff, you can head over there and check out what my crew over there is doing. Other than that, not a lot yet, but I got some stuff coming. Got some stuff brewing. So keep an eye out.
of course, every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, we're going to be doing our Last of Us review. So go on ahead and make sure you check out that after show where we have a full panel coming in. Matter of fact, my co-host Rossi and her guest is going to be coming in tomorrow night, joining us over there. And so go on ahead, check that out. We have some other stuff coming on. We're doing our John Wick rewatches for next month. So we're going to watch all those to get caught up for the next John Wick movie. So take a look at that whenever we drop them. And always until next time, guys. Bye-bye.